In the previous module, we had raised an alarm about the leadership style of performance posturing and how it was undermining a sound economic solution to the water crisis in the Caribbean. In this module, we will take the opportunity to demonstrate why a Caribbean regional perspective still does not appear on the agenda for water security in our region. Before we get into that, however, let us start with some clarification about the words and definitions which we will be using. In 1957, Ghana became the first colony in Africa to become an independent state, and Kwame Nkrumah became the first national hero in post-war Africa. In one of his speeches, he happened to have made a statement that has become part of the African liberation story. Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else will be added unto you. But here is the question. Was Kwame really prophesying, or was this political misspeak? Misspeak is when you are saying something incorrectly or unintentionally conveying a message that is not accurate. It is when you say what you mean, but don't really mean what you want to say. When Kwame said, "Seek ye first the political kingdom," did he really believe the consequences would be that all other things will be added onto you? Because, as we know from history, that was not correct. The second part of his statement has placed him squarely on the wrong side of history. Here's the history that Kwame missed. It is that colonial empires were economic before they became political. The conquest of India began with the East India Company, which was an English and later British joint stock company founded in 1600. The challenge that Kwame faced in 1957 had roots in the Royal African Company, which exercised a monopoly in trade and commerce in the West Africa before his part of West Africa had become an English colony. Its motto translated as follows: by royal patronage, commerce flourishes, and by commerce, the realm flourishes. The realm it's referring to is the empire. The push to exploit the resources of Southwest Africa began with a London-based company appropriately called the Exploring Company Limited. Its original purpose was to capitalize on the expected mineral wealth of Mashonaland, and it later joined other companies to form the British South African Company. Its motto read, "By command of the King and Parliament of England." This motto was another style of misspeak. It is called double entendre. A double entendre is a particular way of wording that is devised to not outwardly say what you really mean. It has been made famous in the Caribbean in our own Calypso. We know that this is a double entendre because this company placed its insignia right in the heart of the Union Jack. So when you think that it is the British flag that you are fighting, it is the British commercial interest that drives the backlash. So even though you may replace the Union Jack, it is the little insignia in the center of that flag that will become the ultimate challenge. I'm telling you all of this because sometimes in our enthusiasm we mistake the forest for just a collection of trees, and we rush to think our strife is over, the battle is won. No, my friend, the forest is much more than a collection of trees. It is an ecosystem, and it may be wise for you to first understand how it functions before you decide to intervene in its functioning. When I see a local water authority putting out a message saying that the national demand for water is going to be met by September 2025, I shudder at the naivety of both the authority and the journalists. because they have not begun to understand the dichotomy that is reflected in the water crisis challenge, reflecting a tension between water resource management and water resource governance. So allow me to clarify for you, my friend, some of these definitions. Water resource governance seeks to restructure the national water resource base through the organizational, financial, and institutional arrangements to increase the flow of water into the national system and to regulate the terms and conditions for its distribution out of the system. Water resource management, however, has a narrower purpose. Its main task is to utilize the water resource base, which is finite, to satisfy as best as it can a demand level of the population, which usually appears to be limitless. But the relationship between these two does not follow the lines of empire building. In this case, water governance always dominates water resource management. So if you are going to pass judgment on the nature and status of the Caribbean water crisis, you need to let us know precisely which part of the system you are referring to. Are you finding fault with water resource management or with water resource governance or with both? It is not uncommon to hear professionals describing the Caribbean water crisis by using such terms as water stress, water shortage, or water scarcity, as if they all mean the same thing. These are verbal expressions, all with very sensitive and complex meanings. And when used in some contexts, they can be completely misleading. Water shortage is usually used to give the impression that the situation is the result of a temporary shortfall in the expected water supply, such as occurring as a result of this year's severe drought. So when you hear that, don't be surprised to find out that most of the solutions that will follow are water resource management solutions, such as increasing the capacity of the reservoirs, replacing old leaky pipes, and digging new wells, etc. But when you hear the term water scarcity being used, gear up, because someone is attempting to transfer a current difficulty being experienced by those on the receiving end of the water delivery distribution system from what may have been a localized management issue into a wider political issue coming from the supply side and being ripe for policy and governance action. Now you are getting into water resource governance solutions, such as high-tech investments, new regulations, revision of the current tariff, and even privatization of the distribution functions. Later on, I will explain to you why desalination is usually associated with water scarcity and not water shortage, and becomes a water resource governance measure and not a water resource management option. Then we get the international consultants using the term water stress to be on the safe side of country comparisons. The term water stress is often used for international comparisons, highlighting one country's water endowment versus its national water needs in comparison with other nations. Here, you are likely to encounter the metric total renewable internal freshwater resources being used to attract attention and international financing to our national water status. This is the context in which foreign operatives, if they are going to lend you money to solve your water problem, would most certainly take the opportunity to impose specific governance structures, such as privatizing the water utility or using more cost recovery pricing, or the pretext of getting more value for your money, etc. In 2015, we started to use the term water deficit because we wanted officials in charge of water in the Caribbean to understand that the root cause of this problem was not the drought nor the lower than usual rainfall. The root cause was a dynamic ratio that was out of balance. That is, the volume of water being withdrawn from the system kept exceeding the volume of water flowing into and replenishing the system. In that way, we started to use terms that would signal to our audience whether we were expecting to solve the problem through water resource management or through water resource governance or both. So you will see in our dialogue on this issue the use of very specific terms with very specific meanings. For instance, water scarcity refers to a local condition in which the water needs of a specific geographic or political area, like an individual island, are not being met. Water stress, on the other hand, becomes an alert condition, expressing the likelihood that if we do not change the policies and practices of administering our water resources, the result will be a further depletion and deterioration of the available water resources. Water deficit, however, which is our focal point, is used to prioritize this most unhealthy condition in which the gap between the rate of withdrawal from all available water sources and its rate of replenishment is growing wider. You have seen in the last module how we have used the water deficit map to demonstrate the potential of a regional aspect to solve this problem. So let us now examine the regional approach to the water crisis in the Caribbean. The regional approach started in 2005 with what has been called the High-Level Forum of Ministers Responsible for Water in the Caribbean. We refer to this as the HLF, so you will find us making references to the 5th HLF or to the 11th HLF. This is an annual event in which the ministers and senior officials involved in water resource management in the Caribbean are provided the opportunity to share experiences and ideas for addressing the water issues in this region. It was not by accident that this high-level forum was organized just 1 year after another powerful international organization began operating in the region. Most of us listening to this have heard of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and we have experienced how, when we have followed their advice, we have been unable to solve in a significant way our economic problems. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the IMF of Water Matters in the Caribbean. This unit is called the Global Water Partnership. So it is no accident that the high-level forum was organized 1 year after this organization started to operate in Caribbean water matters. The GWP organized to provide the financial backing for the high-level forum, with organizational logistics being provided by the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association, CWWA. In fact, the HLF, the High Level Forum, has become a strategic part of the annual meeting of the CWWA. Here is a synopsis of the information that was available to our regional leaders in the last 15 or so years. In 2004, the U.S. Army study quantified the abundance of water available in Dominica. Its surplus existence was known since 1984. In 2011, the DOMEX study confirmed this as a natural phenomenon, positioning Dominica's water surplus as a reliable source of regional water supply. In 2012, the US aid intervened with its modern water law, orienting the countries of the Eastern Caribbean towards a legal framework that manages water as a national resource, not as a regional resource. Then in 2017, we came out with the concept of sharing resources and risks, in which we argued that it is only at the level of regional cooperation that the abundance of water in one member state, Dominica, can be shared in such a manner to ameliorate the lack of abundance in the other member states. In 2021, the GWP Caribbean encouraged national institutions towards preparing their national adaptation plan as an intervention aimed at reducing their individual vulnerability to the impact of climate change and to integrate climate change into their water resilience strategy. Now, we can look at the high-level forum and wonder, why haven't our water system decision makers not been able to come up with a regional approach to solving the Caribbean water crisis? This is the highest forum in the Caribbean, and it still has never adopted an agenda to prepare the region for a more coordinated redistribution of water resources on a regional basis. This is even more alarming given the fact that everyone knows that there is an available water surplus existing in Dominica. They knew that since 1984. We can only conjecture that there is another agenda at play here in the behind-scenes competition over focus and direction. And in such a battle, they usually say the loudest voice wins, and money speaks louder than reason. But there may be other reasons for this water history amnesia. I can offer speculative reasons which can make the grade of being verifiable. Reason number one, you have to examine who controls the Caribbean agenda for water security. Reason number two, you have to examine why water resource management in the Caribbean does not support water imports by any island. In fact, if you examine the ports in the Eastern Caribbean, with the exception of Antigua, none of them have any capacity to receive water imports. And reason number three, you have to examine why the water supply profile being developed in the Eastern Caribbean is unsustainable. So, who controls the Caribbean islands' water security agenda? Well, our first intuitive answer to this question is the water authorities in each island. They should be the ones driving the water security agenda, with financial support from international partners like the Global Water Partnership. That argument sounds logical until you find out who exactly is the Global Water Partnership in the Caribbean. The Global Water Partnership, GWP for short, is a network which was founded in 1996 by the World Bank, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. Their sworn mandate is to promote integrated water resource management, IWRM, through a network of 13 regional water partnerships across all continents in the global south. Here is the profile of the Global Water Partnership in the Caribbean. 1. An integrated approach to manage finite water resources. 2. A multi-sectoral approach to manage water resources. 3. An integrated water resource management system. 4. Networking, knowledge sharing, and cooperation. And 5. Comprising 3,000 partners worldwide supporting this global network. The first three that I mentioned there is its orientation. The latter two is its modus operandi. The GWP began operating in the Caribbean in 2004. Its mission was to support Caribbean countries in the sustainable development and management of their water resources at the community, national, and regional level. On the surface, no island professional will have any difficulty accepting that our water resources are finite and a multi-sectoral approach is desirable, and even the virtues of integrated water resources management are widely accepted. What raises the alarm, however, is the operational mode of this organization. You see, the Global Water Partnership is not a monolithic institution with a global agenda. It is not a lobbying unit. Lobbying units use financial resources to gain influence and direction of the water-based decisions. GWPC does the opposite. It creates circles of influence first and then brings financial resources to reinforce its role as the content influencer. In this way, GWPC positions itself as an ally to all those with the same worldview that was created by the GWP. To put it another way, the GWP does not raise money to influence persons. It uses its influence on people to raise money, leveraging a lot of money in that process. The GWP can boast of mobilizing $500 million for its GWP partners. It does so in collaboration with the G20 countries, multilateral development banks, and climate funds. Caribbean leaders in the water sector are attracted to this because in the GWP you are sure to find an opportunity to get advice as well as financial support in scaling up investments in your water sector. To become an eager beneficiary, all this scheme requires is for you to be smart enough to frame your solutions as a complete fit within the context of integrated water resource management and combating climate-induced water risks. That is the fit that will get you the financing. There are two fascinating things going on simultaneously with the GWP's operation in the Caribbean. The first is the significant role that our local professionals play in the Caribbean network, and the second is the strategy that the GWP has perfected in being able to make their agenda our agenda. True to its networking nature, there is a Caribbean GWP steering committee which comprises a group of independent thinking professionals born among us here in the Caribbean, deciding on the Caribbean agenda for the GWP. So, how is it that this steering committee of Caribbean water leaders has not been able to get their organization to address the issues of sharing some of the surplus water supplies in Dominica? We don't actually know why, but we can speculate on three possible explanations. The first is there is a glaring asymmetrical balance within this organization's intellectual network. What do I mean by that? You see, while most Caribbean nations associate themselves with the Global Water Partnership as a source of finance and economic support, the GWP itself associates with our nations simply as objects of influencing the content of their water-related solutions. Secondly, the GWP's concept of transboundary issues does not apply to our situation in the Eastern Caribbean. To those folks, transboundary issues only arise when a body of water crosses over different political jurisdictions. The GWP supports negotiations and a cooperation among political units who have a shared resource between them, something like a river passing through different countries. That is not the issue of challenge in the Eastern Caribbean. We are talking in the Eastern Caribbean about cooperation in sharing water resources from outside of one's own political boundary. Quite a different matter. Thirdly, their water management model does not support water imports. If the big powers who decided to barge water from Dominica back in 1984 were to approach the same problem today, they would find that there are no ports equipped to receive imported water in the Eastern Caribbean, with the exception of Antigua. In spite of that, all Caribbean ports have special facilities for receiving the importation of petroleum fuel. Maybe oil is still more important to them than water. But the GWP's secret weapon is not the vast financial resources they are able to mobilize. It is their well thought out strategy for making their agenda your agenda. We will be describing this strategy in a moment as we seek to make our agenda become their agenda. In 2021, the Global Water Partnership did a total rewrite of its profile in the Caribbean. It took the opportunity to explain why it was such a unique organization on the Caribbean water scene. Besides the fact that it promotes integrated water resource management, recognizes a multi-sectoral approach, has a wide base of over 3,000 partners, and can raise funds into the billions of dollars. It also said this: the GWP recognizes the importance of networking, knowledge sharing, and cooperation, particularly with respect to capacity building, the documentation and dissemination of best practices, the promotion of public education and awareness, and the conduct of applied research and development in improving water governance. Note where their emphasis lies: not in improving water resource management, but improving water resource governance. From their wide experience in the Caribbean, the GWP has left us with an excellent framework, patterned according to how they themselves effectively intervene in the Caribbean water sector. This framework is so powerful that we have had to adopt and modify it to serve as a guide in designing our concept of an intervention trade model that can redistribute Dominica's vast water surplus among its water deficit neighbors. The GWP's design for intervention in water governance has two parts. The first part is geared towards building the ground floor for everyone to stand on as separate but equal. The objectives in the first part are as follows: to mobilize a series of high-level commitments. That's why they helped to form the High-Level Forum for Water in the Caribbean. Secondly, to enhance mutual accountability. And thirdly, to develop capacity. The second part of this framework appears to be aimed at making their influence permanent by creating an institutional ceiling under which they operate. They mobilize private-public financing, and for a wider appeal, they embrace social justice by advancing gender equality in water. So, if we are so moved to weave Dominica's surplus water into a solution to the Eastern Caribbean water crisis, we can do no worse than to adopt the GWP strategy for an effective intervention into Caribbean water matters. The first one is to seek high-level commitments. But we are not focusing on ministers and technocrats. We are focusing on business units in the Caribbean water supply and distribution system, with a commitment to scale up their investments in freshwater trade. In trade, scale is a critical factor. The second is aimed at enhancing mutual accountability. We have to engage the business units that will help to solve this problem by strengthening their transparency, efficiency, and accountability through a data-driven approach to guide their investments in freshwater trade. Thirdly, which is another way of expressing the first, we have to help them develop capacity. This is not just building to scale. It is also accessing and utilizing knowledge and the tools needed to close the water investment gap in freshwater trade. Then we will add the institutional ceiling to make our arrangements permanent. Here we will target mobilizing public-private financing. We will encourage all business units in the national water system to unlock the potential financing from their international partners for water security and a Caribbean freshwater trade. And finally, we do not need to seek acceptance through any social justice platform. We do not need to convince anyone about water, which is essential to all of us. Instead, what we need to do is to bring new entrants into the water distribution system so that we end up with a multi-stakeholder water governance structure, guiding the redistribution of water endowment within the Caribbean region, from the surplus source to the deficit situations. We have arrived at the conclusion of making this amazing framework from the GWP serve a Caribbean purpose. Remember our introductory mantra: the empire was economic before it became political. In the next section, we will explore with you the wisdom that is captured in this astounding framework. Once again, if you have enjoyed what you've heard so far, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and most importantly, share this with your friends. Thank you.